Hello. We have a lot to get through today for this November reading wrap up because, look at that. I can barely lift that up. That hurt. So yeah, let's get into it. First up, we have Two of a Kind Hocus Pocus. This was 3 out of 5 stars. This one is supposed to be a Halloween themed book, but it's less about the spooky season and much more focused on the circus that's come to town. While the plot twists aren't particularly twisty, they're kind of easy to guess, especially 37 books into the series. They work pretty well. Even though this is mainly about the circus, part of that is Mary Kate finding a fortune teller, and even though she doesn't believe in them, the way it's set up is a little eerie, especially when you keep in mind that she isn't able to figure out the overall plot as easily as us readers. Also, a particular quote in this book, I'd almost think he was cute if he weren't such a pain. You can't say that about your cousin. Whoever wrote this, jail. Jail. Two of a Kind Holiday Magic. 5 out of 5 stars. I wish I'd made notes on this at the time of reading it, but alas. The kids are setting up a school project to run a restaurant, and as part of her research, Mary Kate volunteers at an actual restaurant. I really enjoyed this book because it shows so many different aspects of life. Each character has their own issues and conflicts. It gives us a little bit of genuine insight into what it's like to work in the service industry, and because of the way everyone works together and finds solutions to the problems. Everyone struggles in this book, and they all win. Maybe the outcome isn't what they'd originally expected or hoped for, but this way might have been better. The conflicts in this book were realistic and character appropriate, and the resolutions all came together neatly at the end. Then I read this one, but we'll come back to that. Two of a Kind, Candles, Cake, Celebrate. 4 out of 5 stars. I'm not sure what Ashley was thinking or if she thought her plan through at all. I'm not sure why no one else had the sense to stop her, but everything worked out in the end, so I guess it's okay. That and the final twist was kind of funny. Two of a Kind, Wish on a Star. 4 out of 5 stars. I'm not sure why part of me was hoping for an actual conclusion to the series, but in case anyone else is, there's no conclusion here. It's just like any other book. Of course, we have Dana being mean, trying to get other people in trouble, and just being a menace in general. We have Ashley trying to take charge of everything. We have Mary Kate in a situation and not trying to fix it, but still getting mad about it. Luckily, all involved reached their appropriate ending. I was juggling my thoughts on this book between a 3 and a 4, but the last few pages were packed with puns, and suddenly there was nothing to question. Okay, so now I'll bring this one back, and that is for this. That is the entire number 6 series. And I need to show you all of the covers because they're pretty cool. Okay, now that we've done that, this series was 4 out of 5 stars. I've been wanting to read this series for about 8 years, but it took me a while to track down, and wow, it was worth it. I'm not totally sure what I was expecting or how I thought it would play out, but there is no way I would ever have guessed what happened in this series. I read the first 3.5 books before, and I still never would have guessed it. The plot twist had me yelling, genuinely yelling. There are a few points throughout the second half of the series where the layout gets a bit messy and confusing, and it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, but it's only ever for a couple of pages at a time. I really enjoyed reading this series, and if I ever managed to track down the novels, I would definitely be open to reading those as well. Goosebumps, My Hairiest Adventure. 3 out of 5 stars. I wouldn't say this one is scary, it's more mildly unsettling and a little weird. How to Live with a Calculating Cat. 4 out of 5 stars. This book was fun, funny, and packed with cats. There were also illustrations, some that stood alone and others that would follow across a few pages, accompanied by quotes or commentary. My only memorable issue is that there were a few places where the illustration would come in at the middle of the paragraph. So you'd have to either skip past the comic to finish the paragraph and come back, or skip ahead to read the comic and then go back to read the paragraph. The Snow, 2 out of 5 stars. The author is obsessed with telling us about the main character's hair color every couple of pages, sometimes several pages in a row. We get it. Her hair is multicolored and special. Seriously, if you removed every mention of her hair, this book alone would be 2 chapters shorter, at least. On a positive note, this one was actually relevant to its title and featured a lot of snow. We also got a few questions from the first book answered. Stardust Bones, 4 out of 5 stars. This book contains poetry that is raw and personal, talking about things like queer identity, transitioning, love, and grief. The Fire, 2 out of 5 stars. Christina's level of perception seems significantly lower in this book, even at the beginning. Later in the book, there's a reason for it, but at the start, we're expected to believe she's the same person when she clearly isn't. The boys are finally beginning to recognize the issues with the Shevingtons, but only when they choose to. Like, only when it's convenient to them, or the plot. Again, this book was relevant to the title, as fire was a recurring and somewhat obsessive theme mentioned throughout the book. Similarly, it's impossible to go a few pages without hearing about Christina's special multicolored hair. It would be one thing if her hair turned out to have magic powers and saved them all, but it didn't. It's just hair. And talking about it so incessantly gets tedious quite fast. Tashi and the Stolen Forest, 2 out of 5 stars. I loved this series when I was a kid, so my instinct when I saw this book was to check it out, and then I forgot about it for over a year. And as an individual book, it's alright, but as part of the series, not so much. It feels way too similar to a previous book, so much so that I had to stop and check that it wasn't one I'd already read. This book felt as though they'd simply taken an old plot and changed a few details around. Goosebumps: A Night in Terror Tower, 3 out of 5 stars. Parts of this one gave a bit of a thriller feeling, but some parts were just odd. It feels like it was almost a good idea, but then something wasn't quite clicking. Goosebumps: The Cuckoo Clock of Doom, 4 out of 5 stars. I've read this one several times and remember it quite clearly at this point, but that doesn't change the feeling of dread and tension that builds up throughout the book. I do think the lead up is a little too drawn out, but once you get through that, it's definitely got the classic Goosebumps feel to it. The Asylum for Wayward Victorian Girls, 4 out of 5 stars. This book was dark, intense, and horrifying, but it was also poetic and beautifully written. From the moment it began, I was intrigued, filled with curiosity, and a feeling that gnawed at me with a need to know how it would end. The Gown, 3 out of 5 stars. This was a little unsettling and eerie, provoking feelings of minor distress as felt through the character, but I felt a little let down by it at the same time, though not in a way I can pinpoint. Don't Let the Forest In, 5 out of 5 stars. This was a reread. When we really love a book, we sometimes get the desire to read it again at a later date. This is one of those books that really should be read twice. Rereading this book makes so much of it seem clearer. A lot of the emotions and things said hit harder, and there are pieces that just click. The first time you read this book, you are doing so with only half of the context. But the second time, you have all of that context. You know the whole story, and it adds all of these extra layers to the tortured feelings and the horror of everything that's happening. My first time reading this book, it wrecked me. The second time, it beat me to a pulp, chewed up every inch of my being, spat me out, and repeated the process. So, that's it. That is everything I read in November. Have you read any of these? Do you want to read any of these? What did you read?